Welcome back to another episode of the Languages Pedagogy podcast, where research meets real life in a language classroom. I'm your host, Mike, so you all know, and today we're diving deep into one of the most powerful, underrated, and science-backed strategies in the world of memory and learning: spaced repetition. If you've ever felt frustrated by forgetting vocabulary or wonder why you seem to recall words just before forgetting them, congratulations. Your brain is doing something remarkable. And this episode will not only explain why, but how you can use it to supercharge your language learning or the learning of your students. So, grab a notebook or just lean back and let this sink in. Because by the end of today's episode, I promise you'll never look at forgetting the same way again. Sit comfortably, get your coffee, your cha, your tea, and let's get started.
Woo! Let's go!
So let's start with part 1. Why we forget. And why is that good? Let's begin with a bold idea. Forgetting is essential for memory. I know that sounds contradictory, but here's the thing. Our brains are designed to forget. In fact, according to neuroscientist Lisa Genova, forgetting isn't a failure. It's an optimization. Imagine your brain is like an inbox. If you never deleted emails, you'd never find anything. So, what does this have to do with language learning? Everything. When you first encounter a new word, say ubiquitous or cerradura, your brain encodes that word into short-term memory. But unless you use or review it, that word fades. And that forgetting curve, it's not your enemy. It's your map, your signal. It's your brain telling you, if this is important, show me again. Enter spaced repetition. Part 2. The science behind spaced repetition. The term spaced repetition sounds fancy, but the principle is beautifully simple. Review material just as you're about to forget it. That's it. This concept is rooted in the work of Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist from the 19th century. He was the first to systematically study memory and coin what we call now the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. He discovered that our ability to recall newly learned information drops off sleepy in the hours and days following exposure, unless we review it. But not just any review. Reviewing right before you forget creates what psychologists call desirable difficulty, a slight struggle to recall, which triggers a deeper encoding in the brain. You're not just re-seeing a word, you're reactivating it. And this moment of reactivation, that's where magic happens. Brain scans how increased neural activity during successful retrieval. You're strengthening the memory, reinforcing the neural pathway, and telling your brain, hey, this matters. Part 3. Spaced versus cramming. The myth of the all-nighter. Let's talk about cramming. Raise your hand if you've ever crammed for a test, passed it, and then forgetting it everything 2 days later. Yeah, me too, I remember a lot about it. Cramming creates short-term gains and long-term losses. Spaced repetition flips that. It may feel slower in the moment, but it leads to long-term mastery. Think of it like exercise. Cramming is like lifting a heavy weight once and never again. Spaced repetition is consistent training with increasing reps over time. One study from the University of California found that students who used spaced repetition score 15% higher on retention test, even week after the initial learning. And the best part? They actually studied less overall. But why is that? Because spacing avoids redundant review. You don't study what you already know well. You study what you're on the verge of forgetting. Efficient, targeted, smart. Part 4. How to use spaced repetition in real life. Okay, theory is nice, but how do we actually apply this? Let's break it down. First one, digital tools. The most common way people use spaced repetition today is through apps like Anki, Quizlet, or Memrise. These tools use algorithms to calculate your ideal review interval based on your performance. For example, in day 1, learn the word aubergine. Day 3, quick review, you remember it. Day 7, come back again, you get it right. Day 14, another successful recall, the gap gets longer. Eventually, you only need to see what word once every few months. This is known as adaptive scheduling. Your brain's strengths and weaknesses are being measured and taught on the fly. Second, the Leitner system, paper-based method. Not into apps? Try the Leitner system. It uses boxes or stacks of flashcards. Words you know well move farther back. Words you forget stay in the front. The more you struggle, the more often you see it. It's a beautiful analog solution. Third, spaced listening and reading. Spaced repetition isn't just about flashcards. You can do it with listening and reading too. Rewatch episodes, reread dialogues, but space them out. 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, then a month. Teaching tip here. Spaced repetition for educators. If you're a teacher, incorporate spaced review into your syllabus. Use spiral curriculums that brings all content back regularly. Add micro reviews at the start of each class. Design quizzes that loop back to materials from 2, 4, or 6 weeks ago. Your students will forget less, stress less, and retain more. Part 5. The neuroscience of spacing. What's happening in the brain? Every time you retrieve a word from memory, your brain rewires itself. It creates new synaptic connections or strengthens old ones. This process is called long-term potentiation, a fancy term for making memory stick. Spaced repetition engages both the hippocampus, responsible for short-term memory, and the neocortex, long-term storage. With each spaced review, the memory moves deeper into the neocortex until it becomes part of your core vocabulary. Now, some neuroscientists even describe this process as memory migration. Your brain decides what's worth keeping, and you help it decide by repeating with space. Part 6. Why it works better than massed practice, and always will. Here's a hard truth. Massed practice feels good but lies to you. When you study something 10 times in 1 day, you feel fluent. But that fluency is temporary. Psychologists call it the illusion of mastery. Spaced repetition, on the other hand, feels harder but works better. Struggle is a feature, not a bug. This is why interleaving, mixing old material with new, is so effective. And it's why reviewing flashcards until you're bored is a waste of time. Part 7. Optimizing your review schedule. So, what's the ideal review timeline? There's no one size fits all. But here's a basic guideline. First exposure. Learn the word or phrase. Day 1, review. Day 3, review again. Day 7, another review. Day 14, one more. Day 30, 60, 90, then you're golden. That's the principle behind Anki's space algorithm. And it's also how memory athletes train. Yes, the people who can memorize decks of cards or P to 1000 digits. Part 8. Common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Let's quickly talk about what not to do. Don't overload your deck. 300 flashcards a day? Burn out. Keep it manageable. Quality over quantity. 2. Don't skip the hard cards. They need more love. Let the algorithm bring them back more often. Don't rely only on recognition. Multiple choice and passive review don't build strong recall. Always test yourself with active recall. 4. Don't forget context. Spaced repetition is powerful, but even more when combined with contextual learning. Don't just memorize, go, learn, go to school, go shopping, go for a walk. Part 9. Spaced repetition in multilingual lives. Spaced repetition is also a lifesaver for polyglots. When juggling 3, 4, or 5 languages, spaced systems help you rotate exposure without going insane. And for heritage learners trying to revive a language, it's your anchor. A spaced repetition habit rebuilds the neural roadways you haven't traveled in years. Learning a language isn't about memorizing everything now. It's about revisiting at the right time. Spaced repetition mirrors life. Relationships grow when we return to them. Languages are no different. Words are like people. If you ignore them, they fade. If you visit them too often, it's overwhelming. But if you revisit them just when you're about to forget, you build something lasting. Language learning isn't about never forgetting. It's about remembering better. And in this world where we chase hacks and shortcuts, maybe the real secret is this. Let your brain forget a little so it can remember a lot. And thank you so much for tuning in to episode 134 of the Languages Pedagogy podcast. I hope today's deep dive into spaced repetition has not only given you strategies, but shifted the way you think about memory itself. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to share it with a friend or a fellow teacher. Let's spread the science and the love for smarter language learning. And as always, until next time, keep remembering what matters, one spaced review at a time.